Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order the April 20th, 2022 Committee of the Whole meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Education. We may need a motion for a treasurer pro tem. So we'll take let me just get a quick roll here to see who's here, and then we'll have a motion for a treasurer pro tem. Mrs. Weinberg?
Here.
Mr. Morosky?
Here.
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Ms. Bolton?
Here.
Vice President Jones?
Here.
Dr. Moffitt?
Here.
Wonderful. Do we have a motion to have a treasurer pro tem for this evening?
I move that Brandon Craig be the president.
I second.
We have a motion from Mr. Morosky. We have a second. Any discussion?
I just want to note that I made him the president pro tem as well. So I'm just saying, sorry, President Lindy, that was not on purpose.
Is there a motion to amend there, or like, would you like to revise that for pro tem? That's great. Wonderful. So if there's no discussion, Ms. Weinberg?
Yes.
Mr. Morosky?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Ms. Bolton?
Aye.
Vice President Jones?
Yes.
Dr. Moffitt?
Yes, although I noticed that I am.
My alphabetical order on the fly is pretty weak. So we've got Treasurer Pro Tem. Thank you, Mr. Craig, for your service. We appreciate it. So tonight we have a fairly short agenda this evening. What we have on the beginning of that agenda are the 3-month board priorities, which we talked in more depth about last time. I just wanted to read them swiftly, which is that we're committed between now and June 13th to ensuring the new superintendent has a strong start in the district. We're committed to ensuring the passage of a strong FY23 budget. We're committed to supporting the adoption of a strong transportation plan for this upcoming school year. And we want to begin a coaching series on effective board governance. So excited that we'll continue to work on these. I just want to say again, or share, I guess, a new piece of information with everyone, which is that you remember, if we go back to the beginning of these priorities, we set a goal of making sure that at least 50% of our time by the end of these 3 months, we're focused on these priorities. The reason I think that matters is, if we're going to ask from time from our community and from our administration, I think we should be intentional about devoting that time to the things we really believe matter most. And so a good test and a good challenge for us is to check whether, in fact, we are spending at least half of our time on the things that we said were most important. So I want to thank Pat and Phyllis in our board office for actually tracking the time over the course of these meetings and seeing how we're spending it. And so as of the end of our last meeting, the current number we have so far is 44%, 44. So 44% of the time we've had in board meetings or executive sessions has been spent on one or more of these 4 priorities. So I share that with everyone, both to say, wow, it's pretty close to 50. And also to share, gosh, that's not 50. So I think we've got a couple months left, and I think we've got a nice opportunity tonight to make sure that we're going to hear, I think, a very important presentation on world languages, and then also have a chance to commit some time to one of our priorities around budget. So it should be a nice afternoon. Any questions or feedback on any of that? Okay, so then we'll go right from that into our first presentation on world language curriculum adoption.
Good afternoon, Board of Education and Interim Superintendent Amott. We are really excited this evening to present our recommendations for world languages. Joining me today are Sarah Morales, our World Languages Manager, Dr. Travis Yeager. He is one of our Latin teachers and the chair of our World Languages Curriculum Council, and Liz Owens, one of our Spanish teachers who sits on our World Languages Adoptions Committee. So I'm going to pass it over to Sarah.
Thank you. We are very excited to be here today to present to you a lot of the hard work that our team of teachers have been doing this year towards our recommendation for curriculum adoption. And I have two of my colleagues here representing that larger team of teachers on the adoption committee. And I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Yeager now.
Thank you for having us. Next slide, please. So here, this is the vision that our Curriculum Council crafted and has adopted for our content area. As you can see, our vision is that all CPS students, no matter which school they attend, deserve to have a world-class world language education. Next slide, please. We have three pillars that we bring so that we can bring our vision to action in world languages. One, we want to make sure that students see themselves and other cultures in the curriculum, which includes not only the target language and culture, but also our students' home or community language and culture. Two, that students have access to grade level work in their world language. For us, this means course-specific proficiency goals. In CPS, our proficiency targets mirror those recommended by the Ohio Department of Education. And three, that we address unfinished learning just in time, not just in case. For world languages, you might think of this as communication before conjugation, with teachers and resources providing supportive scaffolds. Next slide, please. A lot to celebrate in CPS world language classrooms. We have over 9,500 students studying 10 different languages. Our elementary students are getting a strong foundation in world language instruction. 5 elementary schools offer daily instruction in world languages, and 7 offer exploratory programs. Our relatively new heritage language programs, they're a couple years old now, and we're continuing to build on those. And we're happy to now offer American Sign Language this year. And for the first time in decades, we are working on a curriculum adoption for world languages. We're excited to share the details of this with you today. Slide, please. We're determined to achieve these goals in order to bring our vision to life for every CPS student. This year, we've made great progress toward the goal of curriculum adoption. We've decided to do a 2-phase adoption across 2 school years. We want to make sure that there are pathways for students to continue their language study from grades K through 12. We're committed to ensuring that students in all of our high school buildings have access to upper level language study, and that each building offer multiple languages to allow students to study a language that is important to their goals. And in order that students have the critical early start to high level proficiency in a language, we want to make sure that world language study is offered in every neighborhood school, and we want to build our biliteracy programming. And I'll pass this over to my colleague, Liz Owens.
As you can see up here, there are a bunch of amazing people that have been selected by the Curriculum Council that are collaborating on this initiative. As you can see, there are a diverse range of schools, languages, and program types. Next slide, please. On this slide, you see the goal that curriculum supports equity and accelerated learning for language acquisition. And underneath that, we have 4 pillars that include accelerated learning model, which are culturally responsive teaching and learning, aligned curriculum and instruction, targeted support, and progress monitoring. The curriculum we adopt must support students in having equitable access to these 4 pillars. Our teachers on the adoption committee have identified guiding questions to make clear what accelerated learning means in world languages. Next slide, please. Up here explains in more detail the adoption process that Dr. Yeager spoke about earlier. Although some of you may be used to seeing a 1-year adoption cycle, the model, for example, the model used with social studies, ELA, math, and science has been problematic for world languages. There are over 50 distinct courses offered in CPS World Languages. And to give you an example, we're going to talk about just Spanish, for example. In CPS, Spanish has 14 total K-12 programs, including K-6 exploratory, K-6 daily, K-6 heritage, 7-8 exploratory, 7-12 Spanish, I'm almost done, Spanish 1-4 for English speakers, 7-12 heritage Spanish, 1-3, AP language and culture, and IB middle year second language acquisition. So this is just one example of how many courses there are. And then when you include the other languages, that's a total of 50, which is why we have the 2-year adoption requirement.
So despite some of the difficulties that we had in selecting resources within the 1-year time frame for so many diverse offerings, resources are just one of the 4 components of a high quality curriculum. So our committee has been dedicated this year to making sure that we have content, methods, and measures aligned to the standards and best practices for language acquisition, which apply to every language and program in the district. So we're excited that we're able to clearly define these 3 components for you, and we've developed a framework for the content, methods, and measures that will foster equity and access to advanced proficiency and intercultural awareness throughout the district. I hope you've all had the opportunity to check out the framework. If not, it is available electronically via the QR code on the screen right now. This framework supports our vision for world languages in CPS, providing clear, accessible information, tools, and supports for teachers, created by teachers, combining their personal expertise in their own classrooms with thoroughly vetted, research-based practices for teaching and learning world languages.
Up here in the left column is what we planned this school year, and then on the right column is what we plan to accomplish next school year.
So in this slide, we see the criteria that we're using for evaluating resources and other components of our curriculum. The must-haves, which are listed here, these 4 in the graphic, were written by our steering committee. They were refined and approved by council as the mandate for the work of our adoption committee. They are grounded in our state and national standards. They reflect the accelerated learning model and best practices for our content area. And although EdReports does not review world languages curriculum, we have used their concept of gateways to create our absolute must-haves, plus other criteria that we would prefer resources and other elements of our curriculum to have. The 3 teacher-created components we have developed this year meet our must-haves and many of these additional criteria, and we look forward to finding the right resources over the following year to complement these components.
And in many languages, we want to say thank you for your time and attention today. We were very excited to tell you about all the great work that's been going on in the World Languages Department. And just our usual reminder that we are in the business of creating world influencers in our CPS students, and world influencers need world languages. Thank you for your support, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Board member questions? Ms. Bolton?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Very exciting. Several questions, if I might. One is sort of a marketing kind of question, so just bear with me. I think one of the things that we do offer that nobody else within, stone's throw, so to speak, here regionally, is that we have such an international district. And it would seem to me that this is an area where we probably need to do exactly what you're doing, but even do it in greater volume. This is kind of a great initiative, greater volume, greater depth. I mean, even thinking in terms of those schools where so many young people whose language is not, English is not their first language. I don't know how we kind of call those schools, but the way I look at them is I call them as our international schools. And I think they probably should be marketed that way from a standpoint of becoming a better banner for them, perhaps. A couple questions. How many, and maybe you might know this, you might not, how many teachers in our district are foreign language teachers? K-12.
We have just under 100. So it varies from year to year from about 90 to 100,
Okay.
I would say, yes.
That seems to maybe need more for what you're talking about. So this looks like a staffing issue too. Wanted to ask you as well, when we talk about some of these, and I'm just beginning to understand what you're talking about, the different courses, the different curricula, the first time that this came up, I didn't quite understand it. So I appreciate your listing them out. I have a question. Do we have particular elementaries that do not yet have anyone in the elementary teaching? I mean, obviously from your presentation we do, and how did we determine which ones? I love the commitment that all of our neighborhood schools will have it eventually, but just wanted to maybe talk a little bit more about that prioritization.
Absolutely. So many of the elementaries that currently have programming in world languages were either carryovers from magnet programs, or it was a community-based decision. So the school decided that that was a priority for their building, and then they were able to use their school's budget to allocate those funds. I personally would love to see some sort of district formula or allocation to ensure that all of our students have access to world languages in their elementary schools.
So that's a belief held by almost everybody, I would assume. It'd be almost interesting. I know it was hard for us to get to where people understood that we needed, what shall I say, music, art, PE, technology. I mean, you had to sort of set goals. What's your, I mean, I think foreign language should be part of that 5 or 4 as well, to introduce it. How long do you think it'll take us to get to where we have all of our, I know, 60-some, not 60-some, but 30-some or so neighborhood schools that would have a teacher?
Well, as you said, it all depends on staffing and the funding that we have available for staffing. So one thing that I would propose as a first step, maybe in a year 1, would be to have several itinerant teachers that could serve multiple buildings to get the program started as we collect more funding sources to be able to fully employ someone in each building.
Great suggestion and promise. Last question. I know that we've been building for the last couple of years the IB program on the west side, going from Roberts to Dater, I believe, and that whole concept of K-12 IB is kind of, I don't know that it's new, but it's more unusual. And I know we'd made a commitment to, at least in the last year, or maybe even before, to making sure that the west side would have such a feeder and a high school. Is in what we're talking about here, and then also in whatever's been asked of the budget request, are we building that IB program on the east side as well as the west side?
So I can't speak to the IB program in particular because I don't oversee all of that, but I can say that the K-12 articulation of world languages, we are trying to grow that on both the west side. That's going very well at Roberts Academy and at Dater High School. So Roberts has been able to strengthen their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade language offering from what was an exploratory model, and through the support for the IB program, those students are receiving daily instruction. And then as they apply for the primary years program of the IB, they will increase the instructional time for the K-5 students as well. At Dater High School, that is continuing on. So this year, the students leaving Roberts were able, not just the ones leaving Roberts, but entering 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, as well as those that are transitioning to high school, were able to take a language proficiency test in Spanish so that they can be placed correctly when they move on to high school, and continue, for example, if they've taken several years of Spanish at Roberts, they would start perhaps in Spanish 3 or Spanish 4 as they continue into the high school program within IB. The opportunity was also available for our heritage speakers of Spanish to show their high levels of proficiency in their home and community language. And many of those students are placing very highly, either as 6th graders, they may not even be starting with Spanish 1 as a 6th grader if they have all this rich experience from their home life in the Spanish language. And then also as they transition to high school, some of them are transitioning directly to level 4 AP, and eventually it would be our IB diploma program courses when those become available. On the east side of town, while we don't have the International Baccalaureate, we are offering that type of testing to all of our students who are in K-6 and K-8 language programs that receive daily instruction.
I would just like to say, as only one board member, I think it would be great that we go back to trying to have that kind of access programmatically, geographically, as well on the east side, especially with AMI and AWL there, and the history that Withrow once had as IB. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ms. Bolton. Any other board members with questions? Mr. Craig.
So I don't have as much a question as just a point that I thought it was great to see within the curriculum framework, though, is the discussion of both the language and cultural. I think a lot of aspects of learning language does involve how do you use this tool to discuss things, to interact, to also understand why certain phrases and certain words are used a certain way. And the other aspect of that is that for folks who do plan to go out to world cultures, you do need to know a little bit about why and who they are and what they say and what phrases will help you get through certain passageways. And so the communication style, the discussion about like, how do I respond to family? I think was one of the things that was mentioned in there, and how do you have conversations within the language is really helpful. So I like seeing that. I think that's an important part of learning a language, is learning how to use the language. So happy to see that.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite things about our world languages standards too, is the focus on culture, both the students' culture and using what they know about their own culture to understand other cultures.
Thanks, Mr. Craig. Dr. Moffett.
I am super excited. I think I sent you all an email like, this is so good to see. And I didn't quite understand everything I read, but you put some context to it. So thank you so much. I think I just really have a statement and maybe a question inside of there. I personally, I think that the immersion of world languages is just what we need to help our kids get to the next level. I think that it is super important, the cultural competency part. So you definitely have a fan over here. We had an opportunity to visit Roberts and see the younger ones that are getting the immersion right in classes. I mean, and then was it AMI or AWL? They were speaking. They were actually doubly immersed in speaking it, singing songs. It was just really, really good to see. So I also know that we have at Gamble, we met the Korean teacher, and that was Korean, and then ASL is at Gamble. So my question inside of there, I know you're probably like, get to the question. So my question is there an opportunity for expansion of the sign language, particularly in Korean, because those are things that I don't think our community knows that we offer, and can really, really go far. I saw a piece on Good Morning America about ASL being a super significant and being paid extra skill that employers are looking for. So is there an opportunity to increase that to more than one school? And then I know staffing is an issue, but I know interest is there. And then before you answer that question, I just really want to make sure that the public knows that this list of offerings is huge. And I don't think that it does justice for us to see it here and not let them know that there is the Latin, we've got Arabic or Arabic, Chinese, German, Russian, we've got the Spanish, Korean. I just think that what you all are doing is really, really great. And I want the community to see that. So to answer the ASL part.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate hearing that support and feedback. As far as ASL, we do actually operate in 3 high schools currently. So we have it at Gamble, at Schroeder, and at Taft. And would love to see a K-12 pathway for that as well as being possibly offered in more high schools. It's been a very popular and successful program in the places that we've started, as well as Korean. Ms. Kim is on our adoption committee, and her students love her, and they love to learn the Korean language. As I'm sure all of you know, K-pop and K-drama and all of that has become extremely popular with young people in Cincinnati. And I do frequently get requests from counselors or from parents from other high schools around the district about being able to access Korean study. That is another way that I would hope to use an itinerant teacher in the meantime until we have that staffing to be able to provide that. I have done some partnering with Activities Beyond the Classroom to try to have some after-school opportunities so that students in elementary schools might get some early exposure to ASL, even though they might not have daily instruction. And that has started at Woodford. And we are also looking to get that started with Spanish and Korean in some of our other elementary schools. Another option that I'm exploring while we are transitioning and increasing this access and getting the staffing we need to make it happen is looking at, for example, education service centers that might be able to provide a virtual or a blended class that perhaps students could take from any of the high schools.
And my last question is, I know at one point in time, years ago, we were offering Rosetta Stone as a possibility. Even parents could, because I did it when my son was in school a couple years ago. The parents could learn through Rosetta Stone and get free access as well. And I know you all came out to Withrow and passed out the headsets and signed parents up. Is that still an option for families?
So that was funded by a wonderful grant that our ESL department had for, it was a 5-year grant. And so that funding source is no longer there. But one thing that I do, we often get questions about the Rosetta Stone because it was wonderful for our families to have access. But one thing that I do recommend in its place is the public library actually has a very similar language study program for free to all card holders that's called Transparent Language. And so that's something that our student, staff, and community can access to learn languages independently.
So can we get, is there a plan to put that out so that parents can support their kids with tutoring and that? I mean, even if just getting that information out would be awesome.
Yeah, I try to share that information frequently,
Okay.
and you know, it hoping that every time it reaches a few more people.
I got you. Thank you. So let me know how to support that.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones.
I think in working with student achievement, I really appreciate the comments and the questions that my colleagues have posed because it gives us a framework and a context in a way that we can follow up to continue to move forward with advancing the world languages. My question is more about procedural than it is anything, so board members can help me with that. They are seeking an approval tonight, is that correct? You're presenting this because this is your formal recommendation, and you said in the student achievement meeting that you were going to do that. So
the formal recommendation, I believe, will come in the superintendent's recommendation on the 25th. And this is just our opportunity to discuss and answer questions and make sure everybody has clarity about.
That was my question. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I took notes to follow up on, so that student achievement can follow up on the questions and the comments that were posed. Thank you.
I think Ms. Jens, you raise an important point, and so that'll come through as a recommendation on Monday. We should probably ask how much it costs.
So this phase that we are currently recommending, since we did not recommend resources yet, the cost is already been covered by the extended time we've paid the teachers on the committee who have done the work. So there is no additional cost for this recommendation this year.
Sure. I was going to say the price of free sounds fantastic. I think we should do 3 times this much.
I think what needs to be clear, I think in the beginning of the presentation, they talked about the other content areas of being a 1-year engagement cycle. They are doing 2 years. So if you can add on.
And so then the cost for next year, the recommendation for the methods, measurement, and content has been covered this year. But next year we'll be piloting resources alongside all of those courses that the World Languages team shared, and that does have a price tag to it. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but.
And Emily, truly, it's okay. Like, I don't need a number. I just wanted to, the assumption I'm making is that it's in line with what our budget is and feels like great. That's all I was asking. Great. And I really just want to say thank you. I think it's exciting to see how much has changed since I was a student at CPS. And I appreciate the ongoing rigor and commitment to high quality instructional materials that's certainly come through today. And also I would just add with every, I think, different content area from whom we've heard over the course of the last year. So thank you for all of that, and I appreciate it. Any other last questions? Mike? Mike?
No, microphone.
Mike?
No, not me, Mike. Microphone.
Here's my exciting thing that we say sometimes with the heritage learners, almost immediately, although all the other things that they have to learn, to be placed on sort of an AP track, since the AP program has so many languages, very extensive opportunities for the kids to shine, and even to be tutors would be helpful. So yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Thanks very much. Thank you all. We appreciate it. Look forward to voting on the item at Monday's meeting. I think we'll transition then. Any last comments? Okay. I didn't mean to cut anybody off. So we'll move then to our second presentation for tonight, which is going to be about the budget engagement plan.
Evening.
Good evening.
And for my new best friend, Rob Wilson, to bring things up for me. So tonight we wanted to share with you kind of a new way of engaging the public in our budget building plan. And so we've come up with a variety of ways. So here's kind of the timeline. I shared part of this on February 28th, the last time we did a public presentation on the budget. And so since then, we've been onboarding the new superintendent and having one-on-one meetings with her and the team so that she can understand. We've also started implementing the financial impact tool. We've been through the first round and we're having second round meetings this week. So tonight at 6 o'clock at the district-wide LSDMC, I will be giving kind of a summary of where we are and things that have changed. But our first town hall meeting is scheduled for May 3rd. And it's going to be surrounded, here's all how we get our money. What are the sources of revenues for the district, just to help the public understand where everything comes from. And then we'll have a series of meetings in between that as we refine the budget and share more updated information with the board. And then the second town hall meeting will be May 31st. And that'll be focused on, this is how we plan to spend the money in the administrative budget proposal. And then always with a target of getting a board adoption by the 27th of June so that we can have an appropriation to start spending the money on July 1. Fine. So kind of the format we came up with is we wanted to have an in-person and a virtual to give our public an opportunity to participate in either way. We'll be doing a Blue Jeans event and Facebook Live, and it's from 5 to 6. We'll be facilitated by Cohere. I hope I spelled that correctly. And hoping it'll be more of a conversational Q&A style of presentation. I'll share the first couple slides, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes of presentation, and then the public can join in by either signing up on chat or like we normally do for our board meetings, or they can come in here and come to the microphone and talk. And so that way we can answer, frequently asked questions, anything they come up with, and get some feedback on that. I will be going in this format, going through the changes to the state budget formula that has an impact on us. So the next slide shows you the topics, I think. Yes. So on May 3rd, once again, we're just going to talk about the funding, state budget change, and then how on May 31st, by then we will have a revised 3-year ESSER plan and how we're addressing the cliff, what's left of the cliff, and what the administrative budget proposal will be. And same format. Hopefully we'll have a lot of audience participation, and everybody is welcome to help us. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Treasurer Wagner. Questions from board members? Vice President Jones.
I just want to know, is the presentation available?
I brought it, but since I was
Okay.
late, I didn't get to hand it out.
That's
I
fine.
apologize for being late.
Yeah, thank you.
Brandon says no problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Jones. Any other questions, comments? Mrs. Weinberg?
Just have a quick question in terms of communication. How will that be put out? And being that I think the first date is May 3rd. When do you anticipate, or how do they anticipate putting that information out to the public?
Well, I'm hoping my public affairs team members will help me with that communication, and Rob's going to help to get it out on Facebook, notifying that our base on when it is and how to access it.
Other questions? Mrs. Bolton?
Just not a question, but I know the treasurer may want to reemphasize this, that all the good work that's been done throughout the year, as well as this additional work that's been done in this transitional period. It's important that the public know that it's still a document that is not done, and a document that can still be influenced and indeed be part of kind of this growing effort of, as I think our current superintendent has helped create a much more engaging relationship with the public. So I think that's important, because sometimes they yeah, okay, you're just telling us what it is, we're not really participating, but it's your intent, as it has been the intent of current superintendent, to make sure that the public is involved and the board is involved with the final product.
Yeah, so this journey every year to develop the budget is really like an 8-month journey that starts off in September, October, planning and evaluating student enrollment and the projections and the scope of the initiatives that we have to implement based on the strategic plan and the board's direction. And so it is a really long journey, and we do want people to partner with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bolton. Dr. Moffett?
As you know, I'm really big on getting the community educated regarding school funding. I'm a little concerned because we're having a conversation facilitated by Cohere, which I think is a wonderful organization. But I would like to find various ways to engage the community regarding this topic, and not just one method. What I could even envision is, how we have a recording that's a small snippet, and then the recording is made available to people so that they can access it at various times. They don't have to actually be in attendance at an event that's facilitated. They could watch this 2-minute or 5-minute presentation on a topic at their leisure. It's not something that they have to actually attend in real time in order to see. So I'm really, and I'm also concerned about rushing this to get this as a checkmark item, that we've done this, and really, really, particularly in the time of a levy, to ask, to educate. And to me, to educate requires true engagement. Engagement is not just a one-time thing. It's a it's a variety of things, and it's over and over. And so, is this going to be recorded May the 3rd? Is it going to be made available? And I would also like to not just have it be Facebook. I think Facebook is one method, Twitter is one method, but also, you know, we just need to do some things differently in order to get a different result. So
Sure. No, yes, it will be recorded, and we'll make sure it gets posted. It's Facebook and Blue Jeans at the same time. And I took your comments several meetings ago. We were talking about next year's goals very seriously. And so the draft goals that you'll be seeing Monday night include a series of regular town hall ones. This is strictly to help us get through the budget. But when it comes to the longer term financial picture of the district, I took your suggestion at heart and have made that into a long-term plan. So thank you.
you're welcome.
Vice President Jones.
Yes, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Ms. Wagner. I appreciate it. I think as a follow-up to just a question, will there be a feedback loop in the event that people have questions? Is there a way that they can call somebody just to get clarification? And I say that because, as you well know, a lot of people in the community don't understand the language of the budgets. And I know you've worked really hard over the years to try to make it as friendly and understandable as possible. And if you can help me with that, I'm sure you can help everybody else. So
Sure.
If we could make sure that there is a feedback loop for people to ask questions and respond to you even after they look at the video or something, that would be great.
Absolutely.
Other board member comments or questions? I just, for my part, Treasurer Wagner, I want to say thank you for including these. I'm excited both about what we can do now and what we can do longer term. I wanted to just clarify one thing. So the focus of the presentation for the first meeting is on sources of revenue. And the focus on the presentation for the second one is the proposed expenditures. But if a community member, a parent, teacher, anybody wants to come, they can ask any question they want to either of those two nights, right? It's not like they have to come with a revenue question one night and an expense question the other. It's come anytime.
Yes.
Ask any question you want to ask, and we're going to try to answer as many as we can.
Correct. We may just, if they ask a question that's specific to a specific budget line item that we're not done with, we may not be able to get the answer, but we'll make sure if we collect that question the first round, we'll make sure we have a ready answer the second one. Yeah.
That's great. I think all of these are just good steps that we're taking, and I really, really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Last call for any other questions for Treasurer Wagner on budget? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think I have a couple of just, while we have everybody here together, miscellaneous notes here, but I do think we'll end tonight pretty early. The first one is the board office has been wonderful about putting together a couple of condolence cards for families who recently lost children. And so if you haven't signed them yet, if you wouldn't mind stopping by before the meeting's over, I have them here with me, and I'll get them back to our board office, so thank you. Second, we had a good first discussion at our last meeting about House Bill 616 and about a resolution from us. We're going to look at a proposed resolution for Monday and hopefully vote to adopt it on Monday. I've also been a part of a couple conversations about the possibility of an op-ed that might come from the board, and I thought it might be nice if it were an op-ed that came alongside several other organizations. I'm imagining something like from us and from CFT and from GLSEN and from the Urban League, could also include other organizations, but to show that there is a broad coalition of people in Cincinnati who care about kids and who care about the signals that get sent from Columbus. I think that the two questions I wanted to ask about that tonight is does anybody think that's a really bad idea? And then the second question was, if anybody would like to be involved in trying to write that language or weigh in, please let me know. There's certainly room for that. But I wanted also just to take the temperature from everybody. If anybody didn't think that was a good idea, I certainly wanted to invite that.
I support it.
Okay,
and
thanks.
support you writing it.
I'm happy to.
She volunteered to help.
Thank you. Ms. Bolton, were you going to say something?
I have a comment. I spoke with a board member from Toledo, and I think what they've done too, and I think it's what Columbus has been, and they led the way on this.
Yeah.
As you talk about different organizations, I think the Toledo folks are coming out with, I'm not totally sure about this, but where they're passing their resolution, but that there is this, their city council is doing the same, their county commission is doing the same. So I'd almost rather the organizations be the governmental organizations if we have indeed unity. And we've talked about doing things together. I just think that that's a very interesting idea to show it. And as we do this, having material that you shared last time, or somebody did, I just want to make sure that we don't fall into.
Give credit to Krista on that one.
Great, thanks, Krista. I don't want us to fall into the trap that the people that are supporting this have set for us, and that is to focus on the K-3 part of that bill, because that's the most, attracts the greatest attention and the greatest heat, and also is frankly a very, very small part of what that bill is really saying, because it's devastating to what it's actually saying regarding teaching and learning and social emotional stuff. So I would hope in the letter that we're hitting actually the bigger issues within that bill, and emphasizing. So we're not it's sort of the I don't know, doll that you kind of stick the pins in, because we mentioned stuff that is somewhat we don't do it. And it's the same thing they've done with CRT. It's a very weird thing. So I hope we're emphasizing some of the more devastating, widespread parts of that piece of legislation and the intrusion into what we need to be doing, what's best for our kids.
Sounds like you're volunteering to help write it, which I really appreciate.
I'll turn my mic off. But no, I'm happy to read.
Got
We've
it.
got great writers everywhere.
Anything else on this? I appreciate that as well. I think it's an important point. Any other thoughts on this topic before we move on? The very last thing I had was a carryover from an earlier meeting about this ad hoc committee that I wanted to raise for a couple minutes. We could decide as a group that we want to table this tonight and bring it up at a later point in time. But I think, in the finance committee meeting from last week, or the policy committee meeting, excuse me, I think there was an important discussion about how best to move forward work on an important set of issues. And as I've understood them from the committee members, there's important work on both the costs associated with our current school assignment and transportation plan, and also some real equity and I think primarily equity and anti-racism concerns about how we think about which kids go to which schools and how to ensure that we genuinely have strong neighborhood schools available for every neighborhood. There's some disagreement at the moment, I think, about the right way to move that work forward. There was a proposal in the minutes from the policy committee meeting to create an ad hoc committee that would focus on moving all this work forward. And then I think there's also a different perspective, which is one kind of shared by me, which is these issues are incredibly important, but we should ask the administration to move them forward rather than creating a committee to move it forward. And so I think the issue to decide is whether or not to create a new committee for this. I want to be clear that I'm not saying we need to have an answer to that in this meeting. What I wanted to do in this meeting was just note that I think that's a really important open question where there's some disagreement and some different perspectives. And I think we could decide that we want to have that discussion tonight, land an answer to that, and move forward. I think we could also decide that belongs in a future and upcoming meeting. And I'm genuinely okay with either of those approaches. But I wanted to make sure that that issue was on the table and get a sense from folks of whether they'd like to, have a motion, a second, a discussion, and a vote tonight on whether or not we create that new committee, or make sure we have that in the queue for an upcoming meeting. Does anybody have a strong perspective that like we must do it tonight, Mike?
I don't know, so I should have saved my hand. I have a strong perspective. I don't know if I have a strong perspective on whether or not we need to have the vote tonight, but I would just say, as policy chair, and so this was presented in the minutes last time from the March meeting, and it was brought up again in the April meeting. I think there is certainly disagreement on whether or not passage of minutes, and Carolyn and I have talked about this in the past, Ben and I think different board members have different ideas about whether or not, if minutes are approved, if that means anything other than people approve of the record from the meeting, i.e., when you approve minutes, you're not necessarily approving suggestions or cookies, as it may be. That's right. And so I think there's disagreement there, and I'm happy to talk about that at another meeting, absolutely. As far as the ad hoc piece, though, and I agree in principle with you, President Lindy, that administration needs to be part of this. But I think this conversation of neighborhood boundary lines, different school offerings is important and big enough that the community needs to be a part of it. And us being an extension of the community, I feel ad hoc. I think of it like the STEP committee, the strategic planning, where it was led by 3 board members, but there was also a broad array of community input and administration. And I think we got to a good solution. So I kind of see it from that perspective, which is why I think it would best belong in some kind of ad hoc committee. And then last thing, I hear about the cookies. We'll get cookies. Go ask Mr. Brandon, he has cookies. Thank you, Member Brandon. So I do think, the work is so important that I feel it's absolutely board work, and our policy states that the board does make these decisions with administration. But the school board, to your point, the 50% of our meeting goal, which I think is great, I don't think we can add this work of looking at the entire district and neighborhood boundary lines. To your point, I think it's an equity issue, and there is a cost issue, I believe. We don't know what that is, but I think this work with the administration, we would figure out what that cost issue is with transportation, et cetera. So anyway, I think an ad hoc committee with community, I think of the STEP committee as a model is a good way to go. But anyway, that's my strong opinion, sorry. Not necessarily that we vote tonight unless people want to.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Roski. Dr. Moffitt?
Okay, I just want to, for a point of clarification for me and for maybe the community, I understood an ad hoc committee to be formed when the work crosses committees or crosses parts of the board. Is that right?
That's part of it, probably.
Okay. So, and I thought that, and I just completely agree with Mike in that I think that work should definitely involve the staff, the superintendent, of course, and her team, but it should also be part of the community. And that is in reference to, we got an email from someone that was watching that long meeting and shared that she had been working on this and talking about the boundaries for years. I think that policy had not even been updated or implemented since the 70s. I went home and spoke to my mom and some other people who were talking about, oh my God, the boundaries have been an issue since I was in school. So I think that the community will have an input, and I think if we model it after the strategic planning committee, which definitely had community input, I think we would find very rich conversation, very rich input, and I don't think that's work that should be done at the board level, but as a committee to that. So that's just my 2 cents on it. But if that's the definition of an ad hoc committee in part, then it would fit within that definition, unless I have the definition incorrect.
Thanks, Dr. Moffitt. Ms. Jones?
She was first.
Okay.
Oh,
Ms. Bowman.
it's not as though, to the doctor's point, this is not something that's just come up in the last 2 months of policy. And we've worked our way through policy to find out who does have the responsibility of drawing lines. And indeed, it is the board and the superintendent. And those are specifically listed in the policy regarding boundary lines. And it's not as though it just came up in the last couple of months. We've been working on these issues dating way back. Matter of fact, one of the reasons we're doing an addition at PRM is because several years ago, when we looked at the boundary lines on parts of the east side, we recognized we're not going to disrupt the PRM boundary lines because they are pretty well drawn regarding neighborhood and a few other things. Plus, you have a really burgeoning kind of school. but you might have a couple of magnets that are under-enrolled, or you might have a community like Silverton that could maybe sustain itself as a community. So I don't think we have to vote on this. As a matter of fact, I don't think we can vote in the Cal, but I'm not sure. But I think we should vote it on Monday. I can think of the ad hoc committee that we had when we were trying to figure out the reasons and the standards that we would use in order to adopt into our district any charter. And it was a huge undertaking. The committees are full of things that they have to do, and you don't want it to be just in one committee, because this reorganization regarding programming and geography and whatever goes across all of the committees. And I hesitate to think that the governance is that we give a direction and then the administration goes and then figures something out and brings it back to us. That they are the experts. They have to do the real work, whether it's implementation or designing, but that doesn't happen with the public watching. This is a very public issue, critical public issue regarding boundary lines and all the other things that are part of whatever this kind of would evolve into. And we are a deliberative body. We are an elected body. We are not appointed by an executive to give direction and then hold somebody accountable. We're supposed to be doing our work in public. And as a person that has gone through, I'll mention these two things, almost the entire FMP and certainly the preschool promise, all of that was done in public. I mean, day after day, meeting after meeting, building after building, and indeed it gave credibility to whatever, any change we make that we're talking about is going to have to be somehow endorsed and representative of what the public is thinking. So I don't think we have to vote on it today, but I do think, and it is about governance, but all these other huge things we've done in public. And I think that's how we have to, the public's work should be done in public, with the assistance, the guidance, the expertise, and the capable hands of the administration.
Thanks, Ms. Bolden. Ms. Jones, and then I have a couple thoughts. But please take your time.
Okay, thank you. I think I agree with what I'm hearing Ms. Bolton say about the business being done in public. And my recollection of this whole conversation about boundary lines, I believe it started as part of our strategic planning process, and that most of the conversations and discussions were held in public as part of ongoing presentations. Like administration would get direction from the full board, they would do what they needed to do, it would come back to a full board. The thing that I have a question about, though, is right now, who and how was the priority established that this rises to a high priority level? And I'm not saying it isn't high priority, but somehow or another, all of a sudden, it just became this important. And that wasn't, I think my issue was that wasn't a decision by the board. That's my feeling about it. Now, I do feel very deeply that it is an important topic, that if we move forward, that we do it as a full board. And then if there is work that needs to be done as part of that, we use our existing committees. And I've never been opposed to this topic being in a committee per se. It doesn't have to be ad hoc. It could be, but it doesn't have to be, because we did assign it to a committee before. So for me, I think we could re-engage this conversation in a public setting where we could begin to discuss what exists now, where are we now, and then work from there to talking about and discussing how we move forward with it. And yes, it would take up, this is the kind of conversation that you may be able to have only one presentation that night, because it's very time consuming and it is that important. and also figuring out how we engage the community in the process. I hope that makes sense.
It does, yeah, good.
By what you asked, we did have this in a public session in the committee meeting. We talked about it in the committee meeting. That's how it came up.
I'm talking.
You're talking about as a full board.
I'm talking about over time when it was part of the strategic planning process, the STEP process.
Yes.
And we taught, so the discussions that happened at that time were all done with full board. Then I believe somewhere down the line, it failed, probably through board assignment, it failed to growth, to finance, budget, and growth. And then there was the conversation in policy. So and I think from what I heard, it went to policy because that's the enrollment policy. Now there's a different question about should it have gone to policy. That's a whole other conversation. I'm not going there, but that's where it is. But my suggestion would be bring it back to where if it is that high of a priority, it really should be discussed in public as a full board.
I appreciate this, and it's been very helpful even just in the last 10 minutes to hear the variety of perspectives that people have on the issue. And so I think people are right. We shouldn't vote on something in a Cal meeting, so we'll get it on there for Monday. I do want to share where I am on this, and I think how we'll probably move forward, which is to follow Robert's rules. If somebody wants to move that we create a committee, they should do that. If there's a second, great. We'll discuss it. We'll vote on it. And if somebody has a different proposal that they want to put out there, that we will follow that process and we will see where the majority of board members are. For my part, I do want to share that I agree with parts of what I heard Ms. Bolton saying, particularly the part about how important decisions need to be made in public. I 100% agree. And I think I heard Dr. Moffitt say too that this has such an impact on community that there absolutely has to be a process where the community perspective is a key part of any final decision making. All those, I think, do cut in favor of doing things in public meeting. Agree. I think the thing I really want to challenge all of us on is for us as a board to get clearer on the difference between governance and management. What I don't want is a committee that's going to direct staff and tell them what to do. What I do think we should have a committee do or the full board do is say really clearly, here's what the goal is that we want to be true for kids and for families across Cincinnati in this context, and to make sure that we are holding the administration accountable for clear evidence of outcomes that lead in service of those goals, and do that in public and do that with full community buy-in and full community feedback. What I worry about is a committee that is creating too much direct direction of staff as opposed to governance. Now, it doesn't have to happen that way. I mean, we could have an ad hoc committee that works beautifully, or we could do it full board, to Ms. Jones's point, and it could work beautifully. So I think we'll bring this up again on Monday. People, please be prepared to make a motion for something you believe in, and then we'll talk about it and we'll vote on it. Any last comments in a minute or two here, Mr. Moraski?
So just real quick, update that'll likely turn into an assignment on Monday. So it's like a teaser. It's like a preview. I know myself, Dr. Moffitt, and Mrs. Weinberg have spoken with folks at Women Helping Women who are already in our schools working on prevention work and things like this. On Friday, not to take away her thunder, but Commissioner Driehaus, I have permission to steal thunder for this moment, is going to be issuing a report from the Commission on Women and Girls that Mrs. Weinberg serves on. Suggesting that Women Helping Women be brought to scale, particularly in our district, because they're already fully saturating other districts. They have the $600,000 it would take to do it, and so it's a program that already exists. So I just wanted people to know this conversation going on. Obviously not speaking for my colleagues, but I know they've had similar conversations. So I just wanted to tee that up as something that may turn into a formal assignment on Monday to make sure that we are actually implementing this with fidelity. So it's really exciting. It's showing proven metrics, and sadly, murders, domestic violence murders have quadrupled over the pandemic, and unfortunately plaguing a lot of our families. So the younger we start, the better.
Thank you, Mr. Moraski. Last call for other comments before we adjourn for the evening. Have a good evening. Thank you.